Jonathan Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Energy and Resources and asks, has he heard any reports on alternative approaches to the electricity market?
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Yes, I have. I've seen criticisms of proposals to move New Zealand to a single buyer model for electricity, and I quote, "It's like rebooting your computer and starting out with all the same problems again. Why do it? It doesn't do anything in terms of competition. I don't see any advantage in a single buyer system. Why do it?" These comments were made by Professor Frank Wallach in Wellington this week, the same professor that the opposition relied on so heavily, in fact championed in their so-called policy to tackle power prices. I'd recommend they find a new expert, one that actually agrees with them.
Supplementary question, Jonathan Young.
What other comments did Professor Wallach make in his address on the electricity market this week?
Mr. Speaker.
Order. Honourable Simon Bridges, in as far as he has ministerial responsibility. Order.
I'm glad the member asks. Professor Wallach told the audience that he'd never said...
Order.
Point of order.
Point of order from Grant Robertson.
The minister doesn't have responsibility for Professor Wallach, and he began to tell us what Professor Wallach had said. He has no responsibility.
When I accepted the question, I decided the question is in order, but the minister, in answering the question, can answer it in as far as he has ministerial responsibility.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
I'll expect point of order from Honourable Simon Bridges.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I have responsibility for the policy in the electricity markets, and that is what I'm addressing.
That's right. And if the minister, when he gets a chance to answer the question, can address it within his ministerial responsibility, that's perfectly okay. Is there a further
point of order, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, the issue is just the wider issue, not with regard to the specific question of whether a minister can now be questioned simply on what someone else has said, whether they have ministerial responsibility for that or not. That's actually something that we're probably quite welcome on this side of the House. We can now question ministers on anything that anybody has said.
And I think that the interjection that's coming confirms my thoughts too. It is quite common that ministers are asked to make comment on a statement, particularly when it's in reference to a report of which the minister received, which was a report by this particular gentleman. The minister can please address the question. Does he wish it to be asked again?
Oh, if I be asked again, thank you.
Would Jonathan Young please re-ask his last... Order.
What other comments did Professor Wallach make in his address on the electricity market this week?
Speaker,
Honourable Simon Bridges.
A number of comments that I would agree with made by the professor. He told the audience that he'd never said New Zealand generators were making excessive profits, and that such a claim is extremely difficult to make. The opposition might want to amend their dubious claims in newsletters and pamphlets and the like that generators are making super profits. The professor also reinforced this government's message that politicians should not be involved in setting prices in the electricity market, citing international examples where prices have been kept low by politicians and the result has been power shortages. I'm proud to be part of a government where security of supply has simply ceased to be an issue that dominates the headlines, unlike the 9 years of the Labour government.
Order. Supplementary question, Moana Mackie.
Supplementary to the Minister, does he also agree with Professor Wallach's comments that under the New Zealand market excessive prices are extracted by generators, especially residential customers when water is short, that generators can and do exercise unilateral market power without colluding, that this is similar to what happens in other hydro-dependent markets, and that it is hard to get competition to constrain these excessive prices when the generators are vertically integrated with the retailers as they are in New Zealand, and if so, what is he planning to do about it?
Speaker.
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Well, I suggest anyone watching listen to the podcast he made, where he made precisely the opposite points that the member makes. He resiled from comments about excessive profits, and what he made very clear was actually, rather than, I'm not making this up, Mr. Robertson, this is exactly what he said, what was necessary, rather than some radical policy.
Order. The Minister was asked a question. He has a right and a duty to answer it, and I want to hear the answer.
Spencer made absolutely clear with rather than a policy prescription, pretty much like what Labor is proposing, incremental reform and pro-competitive policy, just like this government is implementing, is what is required.
Supplementary question, Jonathan Young.
What is the government's approach to the electricity market, and is it working?
Mr. Speaker.
Order. Honourable Simon Bridges. It had better be a point of order.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I just want to make sure that, despite that seeming like an opposition question, it doesn't come off our numbers.
Order. Order. The member is very lucky to be here allowed to be here at question time with a point of order like that. Would the Minister please answer the question?
Well, it's hard to be heard over the braying seals opposite.
Order.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. Just ask the question, please.
But Mr. Speaker, makes it very difficult, Mr. Speaker.
Order. I am not going to put up with this level of noise for much longer. A member may well be asked to leave the chamber if this sort of interjection and barrage continues. Would the Minister now simply answer the question?
Mr. Speaker, precisely as Professor Wallach advocated this week, this government isn't following some wacky, radical plan. We are implementing over time pro-competitive policy in the electricity market, so that today New Zealand has the highest consumer switching rates in the world, delivering real benefits, more than 790,000 switches. There's been 4 new retailers in the market in the last couple of years, bringing the total of independent retailers to 22 in total, and we're seeing also major retailers altering their marketing and pricing strategies in order to compete. This government's doing what works and is continuing it.
Supplementary question, Moana Maki.
To the Minister, does he believe that privately owned generators using older hydro assets should be able to keep the extra returns they make from the public water resource as the cost of new generation increases and drives up the long-run marginal cost?
Honourable Simon Bridges.
No, because as Professor Wallach, I believe, also said about the issue of water, the opposition policy, in so many words, is economically illiterate. The fact of the matter is... The fact of the matter is, actually, using water has an economic opportunity cost that makes it very important that we put prices on these things, and there is huge capital costs involved in building hydropower, something that the opposition and David Parker accepted in government, but somehow now don't.
That answer's quite long enough. Question number 7, Claire Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister